Finding Vanessa by Gas Station Jack. Chapter 1. I must confess this process hasn't exactly been easy for me. Wading through the memories of what happened feels like digging through the rubble of your home after a tornado. You look for anything worth salvaging, and try to ignore the rest. Those 3 days feel like an exposed nerve in my mind. The wounds, both physical and mental, are still fresh. But this is a process, and my shrink says the best way to heal is by facing the trauma head on. So I force myself to remember it one more time to put it all on paper. The whole truth, even the parts that don't make any sense. Let's get on with it. This whole thing began a couple months ago with a phone call to my office. I run a small operation out of New Orleans, meaning I answer the phone when I'm not in the field. I'm one of dozens of private investigators in the city specializing in infidelity cases. Yeah, I know, what a cliché. But it pays the bills and keeps the doors open. More or less. Riggin Private Investigators, I said into the receiver. Answering the phone is just another part of the job, usually old clients looking for an update, or the occasional confused telemarketer. I don't get many new cases from clients calling me, and despite what you may have seen on television, there's no such thing as a walk-in client at a place like this. If I want a new job, I have to make friendly with one of the divorce lawyers or grease the palms of a certain madam at a certain establishment, who knows exactly when a marriage is coming to an abrupt end. I multitask when I can, which means I was cyber-stalking a cheating asshole husband on Facebook when I answered the phone. This douchebag was using an alias to lure in the impressionable college girls while his long-suffering soon-to-be ex-wife was at her parents' house taking care of his kids. That douchebag was my client, and he had paid me good money to dig up dirt on his old lady. Hey, oh hi, the voice on the other line stammered. I stopped what I was doing and gave the phone all of my attention. That voice sounded like it belonged to someone young. There was a hint of fear in it. Hi, I answered, trying my best to sound like a calming presence, something I've had zero practice with. You've reached Eric Riggin. Eric, hey, the voice answered. Definitely a kid's voice. It's me. James. I scanned my mind for any Jameses I knew but came up blank. Not surprisingly, I don't know many kids. What can I do for you, James? It's about Vanessa. I don't know if you've heard what happened or not. Holy shit. Vanessa? Then that must mean that this is Jamie? I asked. Hey, kiddo. I didn't recognize your voice. How long's it been? It's been a few years. Yeah, sorry about that. I've never been good at the whole uncle thing. After my only brother died, I swore to myself I'd check in on his kids from time to time, but there's something about real life. It can't be stopped, or paused, or put on hold. And sometimes it takes all your attention. Look, I know I'm a shit uncle just like I was a shit brother, but at least I can acknowledge that. So Vanessa? I asked. It was his older sister. I did some quick math and came up with her current age. 18. Geez, has it really been that long? What happened? Is she okay? Oh, I guess you didn't know. I'm not sure who was supposed to tell you. Oh shit. My mind jumped to all of the worst-case scenarios, and all my years in this city gave my imagination plenty to work with. Just tear the band-aid off, kid. I haven't heard anything, Jamie. Tell me what happened. She's missing. Missing? Well, she's 18, she's got rebellious Riggin blood, and if she's anything like the last time I saw her, smart as hell. Missing could mean anything. How long? I asked. 2 weeks. Who was the last person to see her? Did she say anything? Leave a note? Pack a bag? I was overloading the poor kid. Can you maybe come here? If it hadn't been my own flesh and blood asking, I might have laughed into the receiver right then. Jamie, I have a job. Geez, did I really just say that? Oh, okay. I thought I'd ask. Thanks anyway. Hey, wait. Is your mom around? Can I talk to Dash? He had already hung up the phone. I have a job? What the hell is wrong with me? It took me all of 10 minutes to make up my mind that I was going back to that shitty town I'd sworn never to go back to. The town where I grew up swearing I'd find a way to escape. The town where I left my brother's body in the ground. I made arrangements to put what cases I could on hold and sent some select screenshots to my douchebag client's wife from an anonymous email address. Next, I threw a few supplies into the go bag I keep by the door, some clothes, cash, smokes, my Beretta 9mm, and a bottle of liquid courage, everything I might need for a week or so away from the comforts of home. I tried calling Jamie a couple more times after I hit the interstate, but his line stayed busy. I tried at least once an hour, but it never went through. You know that sinking feeling in your gut when something bad is about to happen and there's nothing you can do to stop it? That's what I had, times 1,000. I drove all night, stopping only for gas and bathroom breaks, eating and smoking in the car. Vanessa was like her father. Probably too much for her own good. And that backwoods small town wasn't kind to smart or different people. I could just imagine how her last few years had gone. That high school where I had to break a few kids' noses just to get left alone at lunchtime wasn't for the weak or kind. But maybe things had changed since I left. It was afternoon by the time I got to Jamie and Vanessa's home. The kid was pure shock to see me, and the feeling was absolutely reciprocated. He was 15 years old, 2 feet taller than the last time I saw him. In fact, he was taller than me now, and the spitting image of his father. It was downright eerie. I gave him a hug and he invited me in. I hate to say it, but even after all this time I didn't really do the whole catching up thing. Maybe after this blows over, I'll ask him about his friends and grades and whatever, but at that moment all I wanted to do was get down to business. Thankfully, he felt the same way. We sat in the cramped, dusty living room of his family's 3-bedroom ranch-style house. It was smaller than I remembered, the front and backyards overgrown with weeds. They lived in a part of town that looked like nature was slowly taking it back. I would say that they were in the poor part of town, but that place only had poor parts. The fact that they weren't living in a trailer put them in the top tier of luxury. All I could think while I was there was, God, I hate this place. The story fell together about like I expected. She'd been talking about getting out, and had even started working a part-time job at the gas station on the edge of town. One night she went outside for a walk and that was the last anyone ever saw of her. Jamie was in the living room and saw her leave but didn't think much about it. She wasn't carrying anything with her. She didn't look strange or high or drunk. She just walked out in jeans and a yellow t-shirt around 10 o'clock, and then... who knows? These were the facts. The cold, unemotional facts. If I was going to be able to help in any way, it would only be because I used the facts to do it. Her car was still in the driveway. None of the neighbors heard or saw anything. She didn't have a boyfriend. Her classmates hadn't had any contact. Her cell phone was plugged in on the table next to her bed. Facts. What about the police? The police had their hands full, but they came out and did a report, and said they'd be in touch if they found anything. What about Vanessa's mother? Well, that's where things get uncomfortable. My brother's widow has had issues for a while. Losing her husband just cranked them up into a higher gear. She was taking meds for it, but there's only so much you can do for someone that doesn't want to be helped. Miranda had delusions and manic episodes. Some days her grasp on reality was more tenuous than others. I remembered some time after the funeral when Miranda confided in me that she didn't believe Vanessa was really her daughter. She was convinced that someone had come shortly after she was born and swapped her out with another baby. Her Vanessa, she said, was in outer space now, and this thing she was being forced to raise was secretly working for them. I may be a shitty uncle, but Miranda is an even shittier mother, and if this were a worst-case scenario, she was my suspect number one. But Jamie put that to rest. Miranda was off in another city, in the same hospital she had been for nearly 2 years, getting some much-needed help. He and Vanessa had been living pretty much on their own ever since. He was shocked that nobody had told me. "Look," I finally said after I had heard everything there was to tell. "I know you think I can help, but I'm not sure I'm really qualified to do anything here. I've never worked a missing persons case before in my life." "I can pay you," he said defensively. "I don't care about money. Not right now. I just want to manage expectations. You know the 48-hour rule, right?" He nodded. "Well, you also know that Vanessa is a smart kid. Super smart. She's most likely with somebody blowing off some steam in the city." He nodded again. I don't know if I was being convincing or not. Comforting clients is the one thing I could never get right. And right now, I had to treat this like a case. "Good." That's when I said something I never should have said. "I'm going to find her. I promise." I made my first stop at the sheriff's station to check on the status of their investigation. The receptionist made me wait in the lobby for about half an hour, which I spent on my phone looking up any news and public information I could find about this place. It's remarkable how much knowledge is out there on the internet. With social media, everybody is an amateur reporter. Between that, the Freedom of Information Act, and the general delusion of news, there aren't really any secrets left anymore. Death records, police files, a veritable treasure trove of information plugging all of us into a shared consciousness and giving you whatever you want if you know where to look. And the reason I'm good at my job is I always know where to look. That's why I couldn't believe it when all of my searches came up blank. This town had no footprint online. That's not just strange. That's impossible. With a town this small, in 30 minutes I should have been able to find who the mayor was banging. But I couldn't even find an article about Vanessa. "The sheriff will see you now," the receptionist said, snapping me back to reality. His name was Clyde. He was an older guy, bald on top and a smile that looked forced. His desk was clear save for a single telephone, and the wall was covered in a giant dirty American flag. He gestured for me to take a seat. "What can I do you for?" he asked. I explained the situation and asked him for the police reports concerning Vanessa's disappearance. "I'm afraid I can't really help you," he said. "Ms. Riggin's case is part of an ongoing investigation. Look, I'm not trying to break balls or get in the way here. I just want to help find my niece." The sheriff let out a long sigh and lost the smile, dropping the facade. I knew that look from all the times I had it on my face. There was bad news that he didn't want to deliver. "We have a lead on what happened to your niece. A bunch of kids went missing not too long ago, part of some neo-religious bullshit cult. We think maybe Vanessa got caught up in it somehow. What are you thinking?" "We don't know, but we have a suspect in custody." "Jesus Christ, you don't think he murdered them, do you?" The sheriff left for a minute and came back with a thick file, dropping it on the desk in front of me. "Everything we have is in there. The case gets pretty fucking strange and we're still piecing it together. You look like a smart enough guy. I don't have to tell you dash. Yeah, you didn't give me this file. I don't know anything. Good. But if you do find anything, you'll know as soon as I do." I thanked him and we shook hands before I left. Out in the lobby I saw a couple deputies fixing themselves some coffee. I approached them and asked, "You mind if I grab a cup?" "Knock yourself out," said the bigger of the two. He was an intimidating figure, 6'2" and built like a linebacker. The name on his pin said, "Williams." The smaller one was still taller than me, but lanky and young, probably a fresh recruit. His pin read, "Franklin." Franklin folded his arms and sized me up. "You some kind of reporter?" he asked. "Not me. I'm Vanessa Riggin's uncle." "Who?" he asked. I gave them my best cold stare. "Vanessa Riggin." The young woman that went missing a couple of weeks ago. Franklin shrugged and said, Which one? Williams hit him in the chest. Show a little humanity, man. Sorry, I didn't mean, we got the guy. I mean, he hasn't confessed to anything yet but dash. It's fine. I said. Shitty town. Shitty Laos. Well, what are you planning to do? Asked Williams. I'm retracing her last days. I guess I'll go check out the gas station where she worked. When I said that, it was like the air was sucked out of the room. I've trained myself to watch reactions, to know when people are lying. But any idiot could see Franklin going pale. The hairs on his skin stood straight up and he threw an awkward glance at the older cop. This rookie had no poker face. Williams tried to play it cool, but Franklin already blew that. He took a deliberate sip of coffee and tried to sound disinterested. The gas station at the edge of town, huh? You been out there yet? It's been a long time since I lived here, but I remember the stories. There's something weird going on at the edge of town, where the woods are haunted and creatures wait to eat you. I had no idea the stories were still persisting. Or maybe not. Maybe this was something else. Not yet, why? Williams searched for the words that would make sense, but obviously couldn't find them. There's been reports of bear activity out there. Just be careful, okay? Fuck you. If there's something going on, just tell me. Will do, deputy. My next stop was the town hall. Something about the glaring lack of information online about a mass disappearance really didn't sit right with me. Not surprisingly, the place was closed when I got there. By the looks of it, the place had been closed for a while. The front lawn was wild with weeds and newspapers were piled up in various stages of decomposition by the front door. Somewhere, a public official is collecting a paycheck to do nothing. I know I've said it before, but seriously, fuck this town. As long as I'm living in a pre-modern hellhole, I thought to myself, I may as well start working like it. The next stop was the Old Faithful for information gathering. The local library. Once again, I was hit with the sensation that this place that I used to see all the time as a child must have gotten smaller since I was last here, but that smell, old books mixed with mildew, was pungent as ever. I found the librarian taking a nap at her station and asked her if the place kept records of local newspapers. She just laughed at me. Local newspapers? Here? Have you seen this town? Only half of the people here are literate, and half of those are on meth. What newspaper do you think these people are buying? I apologized for wasting her time and turned to leave, but she told me to stop and come back. I think she felt sorry for me. Hey look, if you need information about this town, there's one guy who can help you. He's been around long enough that he knows everything and everyone. She scribbled an address onto a piece of loose-leaf paper and gave it to me. When you get here, ask for Roger. He'll be able to help you. Here I was, on my way to my 5th stop today with exactly jack and shit to show for it. I wasn't any closer to figuring out what happened to Vanessa. If anything, I felt like I was further away, being pulled into this rabbit hole of bullshit weirdness. Was it even worth it to check out this Roger guy? When I got to my car, I took a second to center myself and think about it. Facts. Those are all I need right now. Facts. At this moment, I don't have what I need. Why not see what Roger knows? I plugged the address into my GPS and laughed to myself when I saw where I was going. My old high school building was just as horrible and broken down as it had been when I left. But nothing a few coats of paint couldn't cover. I wasn't sure what I was doing as I parked the car and went inside, but that state of blindly fumbling along hoping for a clue was turning into the theme of this trip. The school was small and dimly lit, and I could hear the buzz of the lights on the ceiling just a few inches above my head. I felt like a giant in there, and couldn't believe that children crammed themselves into this building. Here I was all by myself and feeling claustrophobic. Claustrophobic and a little dizzy. Can I help you? Or at least, I thought I was all by myself. I noticed the short guy in jeans and an AC/DC t-shirt holding a mop, looking at me from inside of one of the classrooms. "Yeah," I said. "You work here?" "Nobody's supposed to be here. School's closed. I'm looking for Roger." The guy gently set his mop down, pulled out a pair of glasses, and put them on before responding. "Are you a friend of his?" "Not exactly. I'm looking for my niece. She went missing." "And you think Roger had something to do with that? Are you Roger?" I asked directly. The man laughed. "No way, I wish." "Well, if you don't mind pointing me in the right direction. Roger is in his office. I'll show you how to get there." "Great." The janitor walked slowly and with a hunch, hands in pockets, eyes on the ground. He didn't say anything as he led me down the hallway, around a corner, and up to a closed door where he finally broke the silence. "This is Roger's office." I thanked him and waited for him to leave, but instead he knocked on the door and yelled, "Hey, Roger! There's a guy out here wants to see you." From somewhere inside I heard a muffled, "Go away. Come on, Roger, open up." He gave me an awkward smile and a shrug. A few seconds passed before the janitor let out a sigh and grabbed the doorknob, opening it and stepping inside. I guess if I had to pick the exact moment my case went from weird to bats hit insane, it would be this one. The room wasn't a room at all. It was just a simple, dirty supply closet, barely big enough for the janitor to fit inside, with shelves on every wall filled with cleaning supplies and boxes. The janitor flicked on the lights, bent down to the ground, and pulled an old wooden crate into the center of the floor. "Roger, are you in there? Didn't you hear what I said?" He opened the crate and... Jesus Christ, I can't believe I'm even writing this. He pulled Roger out of the box. He turned around and faced me, holding Roger in his arms. Roger was an old-fashioned wooden ventriloquist dummy with a black suit painted on. The eyes popped open and it looked at me, then the head spun around to look at the janitor, then back at me. The dummy yawned and stretched and went through the show of waking up before finally speaking. "Who the hell is this guy? Didn't you see the sign on my door that said do not disturb?" Roger's voice had a slight tinge of Bostonian accent. I couldn't help myself. "What the fuck is this?" I yelled. "Some kind of stupid joke? My niece is missing. She could be dead for all I know, and you're playing games right now." It took a lot of self-control not to sock the janitor across the face. Instead, I just turned and started to walk away. "Detective, wait!" he yelled to me in the puppet's voice. I stopped and turned back. "How did you know I was a detective?" I asked. "Oh, I know a lot of things," he said through the puppet. It was difficult listening to him, because he refused to make eye contact, choosing instead to stare at the puppet, who was looking right at me. I had to give him credit. I couldn't see his lips moving at all. "For instance, I know you just drove here from New Orleans. You stopped by the sheriff's station and then the library, but they were no help. And now you want answers about what happened to Vanessa." "All right," I said. "I'll bite. How do you know all that?" The janitor refused to break character, saying everything through the doll. "It's the details. The Beretta holstered under your jacket, the tactical boots, the haircut, and not least of all the police report sticking out of your back pocket. I know you're not working directly with the sheriff's department because you haven't shaved in at least a week, so that says private eye. I know you hit up the library because the librarian is the only person that could possibly have known I was here. I know you're looking for Vanessa Riggin because unlike some people I keep up with the news. You said your niece went missing? Assuming neither of you are adopted, there's only one missing local girl that shares any of your dominant features." "All right," I said. This guy wasn't terrible. Maybe he had a few screws loose, but credit where it's due, he had the Sherlock shtick down pat. "What about New Orleans? How did you know I drove all night?" "Two reasons. First, you smell like you haven't had a shower in a couple days. And second, I stole your wallet and looked at the address on your ID." He extended his wooden puppet arm and sure enough, the little bastard was holding my wallet. And to be honest, I wasn't even mad. This little shit got the jump on me, and that's all it takes to earn my respect. I actually laughed. All right, Roger, how does this work? I pay you to be my research consultant? Believe it or not, said the puppet, I'm not big on money. What I deal in is information and favors. I can tell that you don't have any of the former, so I'll take the latter. One favor. At the time of my choosing. And in return, I'll look up everything there is to find about what happened to your niece. When I get something, I'll call you. I shrugged. Okay, fine. Shake on it? I'm not proud to say this, but I shook hands with the puppet. Then he gave me back my wallet. I finally got around to hitting up the gas station where Vanessa was working before her disappearance, and let me say what a shithole. From the outside, it looked like it hadn't been cleaned in weeks. When I walked in, I could smell fresh paint and raw sewage. The man behind the register was smoking a cigarette and stacking pennies into a little pyramid, oblivious to my presence. It was right then that my tooth started hurting like hell. I grabbed a box of BC powder and walked up to the register. Hey, I said to the clerk. He was a young lanky blonde guy with blue eyes and reminded me of what a golden retriever would look like in human form. His name tag said, Jerry. He looked up at me and smiled. Hey, he said back, before returning all of his attention to the coin pyramid. I want to buy this, I said, getting a little annoyed. How much is it? The guy asked. I don't know, you're the one at the cash register, you tell me. He looked at the box, then at me. What's it worth to ya? Look man, I just want to buy this. I'm not trying to play any games here. Jerry scowled at the box and said, Just keep it. What? It's yours. On the house. I sighed and put a $5 bill on the counter before heading to the bathroom for tap water to wash it down. I must have been distracted by the idiocy of the clerk because I didn't even notice until I was already inside the bathroom that there was someone else in there. I went straight for the sink and turned on the faucet, then I heard it. Guitar music. I turned around to see a man standing next to the urinal, wearing nothing but a cowboy hat, red boxers, and boots, playing a familiar tune on the wooden guitar that was slung over his shoulder. Oh shit, I said. I didn't know it was occupied. The man started to sing along to the tune he was playing. There is a house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun. Are you freaking kidding me? And it's been the ruin of many a poor boy, and God, I know I'm one. He turned and, still playing and singing, walked right out of the bathroom. The fuck? I took 2 BC powders and washed them down with the water that tasted especially metallic before I went back out to the lobby. The clerk had lit another cigarette, and the $5 bill was still on the counter. What was that all about? I asked. What was what all about? That guitar-playing guy in his boxers? That's some kind of act or something? Jerry looked around the store, then back at me. Where? He was in the bathroom with me. Guy in a cowboy hat? Ringing any bells? Oh, he said. That might have been the bathroom cowboy. Did he have a beard? No. That does sound like the bathroom cowboy. Alright, look, I'm tired of playing games. I just want to ask you some questions, is that okay? Jerry grinned. I like questions. There was a girl that used to work here, named Vanessa. Did you know her? Oh, I'm actually pretty new. You're probably gonna want to talk to the other clerk. Jack. Okay, when does Jack come in? He should be here in an hour or so. You want some jerky? Jerry extended a half-eaten stick of jerky towards me. Before I could say, hell no, the phone on Jerry's desk started ringing. He answered with a, Yellow? After a second, he looked at me and asked, Are you Eric Riggin? That's weird. Yeah? It's for you. He handed me the receiver. This is Eric. Mr. Riggin, it's Sheriff Clyde. I've been trying to reach you. Figured when your phone kept going to voicemail you must be in the one part of town without reception. Is there a development? I asked. No, look, I don't know how you know Roger, but next time you see him tell him that we're even. What do you mean? Roger is calling in his one favor. I know you've probably done interrogations before, right? I'm giving you 20 minutes with the suspect we have in custody. After that, you're done, and officially, this never happened. Come here before I change my mind. Are you serious? I'm always serious. Okay, I'm on my way. What's his name? Middleton. Spencer Middleton. Chapter 2. Spencer Middleton's hands were shackled to a steel-eyed plate that had been lazily welded onto the metal table in the center of the interrogation room. It was barely larger than Roger's supply closet. One light overhead, no window, 2 folding chairs, and a plastic camera tripod in the corner closest to the door. They had put him in an orange jumpsuit a couple sizes too big, and somebody had roughed him up pretty good. He had a swollen shiner on his left eye that blended into the purple bruises covering most of his face. When he saw me, he grinned. Well, you don't look like a lawyer. And you sure as hell ain't a cop. Let me guess. You're the newest one they sent to kill me? I took a second to gain a sense of the man I was about to talk to. The clock was ticking down 20 minutes, but those first brief moments set the trajectory and could make all the difference. Here I was just a few feet away from the asshole that had probably killed my niece, and I needed to figure out a way to pry information from him. I was coming into this with nothing. No carrot, no stick, so how do I trip him up? Hell, maybe he'll just give me what I want out of the goodness of his heart. I'd done a little research on the drive over. Spencer was a local who had disappeared a while back and joined the army. After an honorable discharge, he made it a point to mostly live off the grid, save for a handful of run-ins with the law. He had a habit of starting or ending fights, depending on how you look at it. I made my move, returning his smile and pulling out the chair on the other side of the table. From here I could see that the man had a nasty-looking scar straight across his throat. I sat and faced him, waiting to see if he had anything else to offer. He didn't. So I went first. Who's trying to kill you, Spencer? He laughed softly and said, Hey, don't I know you? I doubt it. Yeah, I do. You went to my high school, right? You're Donnie's brother. I maintained my poker face best I could, burying the sting of hearing this asshole mention my brother's name. It wasn't time yet to show my hand, and at least I had him talking. You said? Somebody's out to kill you. Why would someone want you dead? Did you do something? You know, when I get out of here, I'm going to cut your face open. From here dash. From across the table he pointed at the spot just over my right eye. To here. He dragged the point of his finger slowly down towards my neck. I took a long breath. I'm not a cop. Or a lawyer. Just an interested third party. There sure are a lot of those in this town, aren't there? What do you mean by that? Spencer relaxed in his chair and leaned his head back to stare at the ceiling. Man, come on, just ask me whatever it is you came to ask, all right? I'm starting to think you might not know anything. Maybe the sheriff oversold you as some kind of badass when really you're just a guy that was in the wrong place and too dumb not to look guilty. Spencer looked me in the eyes and laughed a short, staccato kind of laugh. You're going to use pride and ego down on me, Riggin? This ain't amateur hour. I spent years on the other side of this. I've interrogated Al-Qaeda in a cave in the desert. Shit. This asshole had my number. Look, he went on. I'm not going to bullshit you. Quit trying to work around it, and ask me the fucking question you came here to ask me. This asshole was running the show now, and we both knew it. Might as well take a shot. Do you know what happened to my niece? Vanessa? Spencer held up both palms. Is that supposed to be a no? I asked. That's supposed to be a let's make a deal, Clarice. Quid pro quo, right? All right. What do you want, Dr. Lecter? And more importantly, what are you offering? I can tell you exactly where a certain missing teenage girl went, where you can find her. And you can ask her yourself what happened. I can draw you a fucking map if you want. But in exchange, I want something from you. Something small, something you won't ever miss. My heart was pounding. It took every bit of restraint I had left not to jump across the table and strangle the answers I wanted out of him. Okay, I said. Name your price. Spencer leaned in and spoke each syllable deliberately. I want 1 of your teeth. He smiled and laughed again. What the fuck did you just say? That's all I want. I want you to pick a tooth. Any tooth. And pull it out for me. You've got dozens, right? You going to miss one? I don't think so. You pull out a tooth for me and I will tell you exactly where you can find her. I hope you burn in hell, you piece of shit. Really? You value your teeth more than your own family? Good thing your brother isn't alive to see you make this choice. I knew he was baiting me, and I wish I had been smarter, but I wasn't. I jumped out of my chair so fast it launched across the room and swung a wild right hook that would have broken bones if it had landed. But he dodged it by an inch, caught me by the fist, and used my follow-through to pull me across the table. My face hit the metal, and before I knew it, he had hooked his arm under my chin. In a single motion, he twisted me onto my back and locked his arm against my windpipe, squeezing tighter and tighter until I started to black out. I tried to scream, but there was no way air was coming in or going out. The world went black and I knew I was done for. That son of a bitch was faster and stronger than I could have ever expected, and I'm glad I'm more lucky than careless. I didn't hear the deputies come in, but if they had waited a few more seconds to pull me away, I might not be here right now. As they helped me out of the room, Spencer let out a loud, gleeful cackle that followed me all the way out into the lobby. It was getting dark by the time I was patched up and leaving the sheriff's station, and I had decided to spend the rest of the day getting shit-faced. That asshole all but confessed to killing Vanessa, but that wasn't enough. He wanted to, needed to, rub it in my face, and I let him. I had the who, just not the how, where, or the why. But with a guy like that, does there even need to be a why? Armed with this information, I wasn't exactly in a hurry to go back and see Jamie. The only bar in town was closed for some kind of bullshit holiday, so I decided to celebrate alone. The bottle in my go bag might not be enough, I thought, so I went back to the shitty gas station on the edge of town. The sheriff was pissed at me for what had happened, and I don't blame him. I lost my cool, and you can't do that if you're working on the side of the law. Which, for the time being, I was. I couldn't help but wonder how hard it would be to get away with killing Spencer while he was in custody. When I got to the gas station, the clerk behind the counter didn't even look up from the book he was reading. He was considerably younger than me, with bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. A pair of crutches were leaning on the counter next to him. I bought a bottle of whiskey and a pack of smokes, and as he rung me up I asked him, "Hey, do you know of a good hotel near here?" "No," he said simply as he handed me my change and went back to his book. "All right, thank you, Mr. Personality." When I got back to my car, I tried to look up the nearest place with a cheap hotel, but was reminded that this part of town doesn't get cell or internet service. All I wanted to do at that moment was drink and shower and sleep. After a minute of thinking about it, I decided I could do with 2 out of 3. After getting sufficiently inebriated, I put my seat into a reclined position and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke up the next morning still a little drunk to the sound of my cell phone ringing. When I checked the caller ID, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Donnie's cell. It rang a couple more times while I sat up and tried to wrap my head around the moment. Where was I again? My car? What happened yesterday? The weight of it all came crashing back into place in an instant. Vanessa's killer was sitting in a cell somewhere laughing at me. The phone continued to ring. I looked again, but this part still didn't make sense. Who was calling me from my brother's phone? And how? I answered. Hello? Hey Eric. It's been a while, huh? What the fuck? What the fucking fuck? Who is this? I'm not sure how long I've got. I've been trying to get through to one of you for a long time. I asked you a question? Who is this? You know who this is, Eric. My brother is dead, and when I find you I'll make sure you are too. Always gotta be the badass, huh? Remember Merlin? Merlin. Hadn't thought about him in a long time. When we were kids, sometimes we would play superheroes. We'd take turns being the bad guy, and I always wanted to be Batman or Wolverine, but Donnie always wanted to be a wizard named Merlin. He started his own mythology around the character. A time-traveling wizard that rode a motorcycle. When I got a little too old to play make-believe, he started drawing comics about the guy. I never told him, but I found them and read a few, and they were impressive. Anybody could know about Merlin. Would anybody know that I stole a car my junior year, but you took the blame for it? A chill ran down my spine and suddenly the car felt way too cramped for me. I opened the door and tried to step out, but a dizzy spell almost put me on my ass. I held onto the roof of the vehicle until it passed, then I put the phone back to my ear. Who is this? I told you it's me. Tell me the truth. You're looking for Vanessa? You've got to find her. I watched my brother die. I saw his body get put into the ground. I died. And then they came for me, and they put me here. Where is here? I don't know. But I do know that they're watching you. They've been watching you ever since you came back. I think they haven't decided what they're going to do with you yet. We're both running out of time. You have to get to Vanessa before they get to you. Tell my kids I love them. There was a loud crackle from the phone and then it disconnected. I stared at the screen like an idiot for way too long, then did the only thing I could think of. I dialed the number back. At that exact moment, I heard a cell phone ring from somewhere just beyond the gas station. That son of a bitch is here. I ran back there, towards the sound of the ringing. It was hard to pinpoint exactly where it started, but I knew it was coming from somewhere in the woods, beyond the tree line. I ran straight into the forest, making a mental note on the way to check out that large mound of fresh dirt next to the dumpster. It looked like something had been buried there recently, but I couldn't afford the distraction yet. How many times had it rung? 4? 5? The ringing continued, now somewhere much deeper in the woods. I followed, trying to determine exactly where the noise was coming from. As I ran further in, the ringing became more of an echo, all around me. I checked the phone still in my hand and saw the message. No network detected. Emergency calls only. The ringing got louder, and then it turned into something else. No longer a ringing, more like a loud chirping, like an insect of some kind, then it morphed into a deafening noise, somewhere between a roar and a scream, all around me. I pocketed the phone and instinctively reached for my piece. But it wasn't there. I'd left it in the car. Look, I know how this sounds. It's crazy. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But it only got worse. The temperature in that spot started to crank up, like I was next to an invisible fire ready to consume the entire forest. I had the sensation that I was burning up, about to be cooked alive, and my fight or flight response kicked into overgear. I picked a direction and started running as fast and as hard as I could. The heat got further and further away as I jumped over logs and limbs and ditches and finally, found a clearing. My lungs were ready to explode by the time I stopped and collapsed to my knees and threw up. I didn't have long to relax before I heard something crunching through the forest in front of me. I pushed myself to my feet and scanned the area for any kind of weapon, but there wasn't anything worth grabbing. Not a rock or a decent stick or even a tree nearby worth hiding behind. What was I thinking running out here into the middle of this clearing? I was in the dead center of a nearly perfect circle the size of a tennis court, no trees, only knee-high grass. Basically, a sitting duck. Then I saw it. A bear at the edge of the trees right in front of me. I say that it was a bear I saw, which is technically true, but also not. It looked at me and I was convinced I had lost my mind and gone crazy, because in that moment nothing made any damn sense. The thing I was looking at was, best I can tell, an enormous grown man, nearly 7 feet tall, wearing a tan teddy bear costume, complete with an enormous felt head and black button eyes the size of saucers. Like some kind of school mascot from a nightmare, it was covered in dirt and leaves, and when it saw me it started waving excitedly. "Hey," I said uncertainly. Then it turned both of its middle fingers up to me and did a little dance. "Hey man, I'm kinda lost." The bear didn't say anything. It just pointed at me, then at its crotch, and started pelvic thrusting at the air. God, I wish I had my gun right now. Chapter 3. I woke up suspended off the ground in a small dark room with that ever so familiar feeling of not knowing where the hell I was. The walls were covered in shelves packed with cleaning supplies, paper products, and canned goods. When I tried to sit up, the world shook and swung under me, and it took a few tries before I realized that I was being held up by a braided rope hammock. "You awake?" asked a voice to my right. I turned and saw the gas station clerk from earlier, Jerry, sitting on a milk crate and smiling. I tried to sit up, but a pain shot through my leg like electricity and I fell back onto the hammock. "Where am I? What happened? Did you paint my nails?" I looked at the red nail polish on my right hand, then at Jerry. "You like it?" "No." "Okay, that's fair. You're more of a fire truck than a cherry red anyway, but I thought I'd take a chance." I looked at the source of the pain in my leg and saw that it had been wrapped tightly in a makeshift duct tape cast that wrapped right around my pants leg. That's when it all came back to me, a bizarre memory that wouldn't have been out of place in a David Lynch fever dream. I reached out, grabbed Jerry by the collar of his shirt, and yanked him close to me. "I need to talk to the sheriff. Now." The man in the bear costume stayed there on the other side of the clearing, spinning his arms and legs in a bizarre dance like a PCP Jack teenager at the disco, occasionally looking my way as if to make sure that I was still watching. I slowly started to back up, putting one foot behind the other, carefully adding to the distance between us. I didn't know the score, but I sure as hell didn't want to push my luck. Once I got back to my car I could call the sheriff and have him bring all his deputies and an extra large straitjacket, but that plan required that I first get back to my car. I had my eyes locked on the bear man, so I saw exactly when the arrow whipped right through him. It came from somewhere in the forest behind him, entered his bear suit from the back, just below the armpit, and passed straight through the other side towards me. I didn't have either the time or the reflexes to dodge. The next thing I knew, I had been struck. I hit the ground and the man in the bear costume grabbed his wound and danced his way back into the woods. The arrow had lodged itself deep in my left leg a few inches above the knee, with the light wooden shaft protruding straight out. It was the single most painful thing I had ever experienced, and sheer adrenaline is probably the only reason I wasn't going right into shock. 2 men donned head-to-toe in camouflage and carrying hunting bows stepped into the clearing at the same spot where the bear man had emerged. They both had shades of green smeared all over their faces like war paint. The fat one was cussing and yelling when he emerged. I screamed, partially to get their attention and partially because I just couldn't help it. "Ah shit," yelled the skinny one. "Did we get you?" He dropped his bow and ran over to me while the fat one put his own on a sling over his shoulder and slowly walked over to join us. "Who the fuck are you?" asked the fat one. The skinny one pulled an 8-inch knife out of its sheath on his belt and sliced open my pants leg around where the arrow had lodged. I took a look and wished I hadn't. "You shot me!" I yelled. It was about the only thing I could muster the strength to say besides the lengthy paragraph of expletives I couldn't hold in if I tried. The skinny one looked at me defensively. Well, hell, dude. We weren't expecting no people but us to be out here. Bear's gonna get away now, boy, complained the fat one. You think you can walk? I didn't answer right away. The shaft of the arrow was shaking with my pulse, and I knew it was embedded into my femur. The fat man knelt down for a closer look and whistled. Yep. That's in there all right. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on anything but the pain. Every breath, every heartbeat, every micro-movement radiated through the arrow like an antenna into the wound and down the nerve in my leg. My eyes shot open and I let out a scream. The fat one had reached out and grabbed the arrow at the base. With his other hand, he grabbed the top and snapped the shaft off. I collapsed onto my back and stared up at the sky, hoping that the pain would just knock me out already. There, said the hunter. Now we don't gotta worry about it, snag Jin on every little thing. Ned, help me get him to the four-wheeler. The other one, Ned, pulled me to my feet and together we went back into the woods. I kept an arm over both of their shoulders, basically hanging on and letting my bad leg drag the whole way. Not too far into the forest there was a small trail that we followed for close to half a mile before we reached the four-wheelers. I don't remember the ride back to their truck, but I remember them smacking me on the face when we got there to make sure I was still alive. Y'all get him? Asked the fat woman sitting in the driver's seat of the white extended cab truck stained brown from countless layers of dried mud. The fat man got off the four-wheeler and answered, Nah, he got away. I clipped him though, bragged Ned as he jumped down from the four-wheeler. Left a blood trail. We may still be able to get him. You shut up, boy. We ain't going nowhere tonight. Gotta get home before the sun goes down. The woman looked at me and smiled a big, toothless smile, her bright red cheeks standing out against her pale skin like she had already had a few drinks too many. Oh, you got something though? The fat one grabbed me by the hair and yanked me off the four-wheeler, throwing me to the ground. I let out another scream. What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you crazy? That thing out there isn't a bear, it's a person. And you assholes shot me. I need to get to a hospital for Christ's sake. The fat man looked at the woman and said, Yeah, Ned got this one by accident. Well, that ain't a total loss then, she said back. Why is he still alive? They're easier to move when they're alive, and they taste better if they're scared when you put them down. What? Ned let out a whoop and jumped on top of me, pushing my face into ground and yanking at my pockets. He managed to dig out my phone, wallet, and keys before I finally got a handful of dirt and smacked it into his eyes. He fell off of me and I jumped to my feet, running towards the safety of the forest when bang! I froze. Now I wouldn't be too keen on running back out there if I were you. I put my hands in the air and slowly turned around to face the fat one pointing a .45 at me from what I would consider point-blank range. Close enough that I could recognize it as a Dan Wesson specialist. These guys were bow hunting for sport, but smart enough to bring along something heavier just in case. Smarter than me, that's for sure. Why not? I asked. I doubt there's anything out there as bad as right here. Well, that's where you're wrong. Oh, cooed the woman from inside the truck. Shoot him! Shoot him! Shut up, woman! I ain't gonna shoot him just 'cause you said so. Hey now, I said softly. Suddenly, the pain in my leg didn't seem so bad. Let's talk about this for a second. You don't have to kill me. I don't know you from Adam. You can just leave me here and we can forget all about this. Ned reached out for the gun and said, Let me do it. You got to do the last one. The fat one sighed and handed the gun over. Fine. But aim careful. One shot, one kill. Wait. I screamed. I know where the bear is. I can take you to him. He's lying, whined the fat woman. No, I'm not. We're friends. Why the hell else would I be out here in the middle of nowhere with the bear? Ned gave the fat man a, "What now?" look, and the fat man scrunched up his face as he thought about it. "Okay," he finally said. "Take us to him, and then maybe we'll let you go." Maybe. 1 gun, 2 hunting knives, 2 bows, a quiver of arrows. I raced every scenario through my mind quickly. How do I get to one of their weapons without getting killed first? Forest, 4-wheeler, truck. Is there any realistic way to escape without being shot in the back? Things weren't looking good, but I was still breathing for the time being. It'll be faster if we take the truck. The hunters were being smarter than I would have liked. The big one, I picked up that his name was Paw, put me in the back seat of the cab next to Ned. He threw all of the weapons, knives included, into the truck bed and climbed into the back with us. I was sandwiched with Ned to my right and Paw to my left in that tiny vehicle that smelled like shit. Literally, it smelled like human feces. The seats were torn up and wet, and I saw a few small roaches scurry away from us. After Paw slammed his door shut, a tiny face looked back at me from the passenger seat. A little girl with matted blonde hair, no older than 10. She smiled and said, "Are we gonna eat this one?" "Probably," said the fat woman as she cranked the engine. "Which way?" asked Paul. I pointed straight ahead. "Get up here on the main road and take a right." "You better not be trying nothing," warned Paul. We hit the main road and the truck climbed up to a slow 30 mph. "Go straight for about a mile," I said. "Then you'll see a dirt road on the left." "Ain't no dirt road," squealed the fat woman in a high-pitched voice. "I know these woods like the back of my hands and I ain't remember no dirt road up here." Pa punched me hard in the stomach. "You think you're funny, boy?" He knocked the wind out of me, and I doubled over in the seat as they all started laughing maniacally. There's an expression in trapping called ring off, which is much worse than the phrase implies. If you're unfamiliar with the term, allow me to explain. Trappers have to check their traps frequently, because if they don't, an animal's survival instinct will kick in and they will free themselves, one way or another. The most common form of ring-off is when a coyote or jaguar or anything with sharp enough teeth chews through its own leg to free itself. It ain't pretty, but it sure beats the alternative, right? In that moment, I understood exactly how those trapped animals felt. I bit down hard on the exposed piece of the wooden arrow shaft, as hard as I could stand, and yanked it out as fast as I could. For the second time in as many hours, I experienced the single most painful thing I'd ever felt. But now the arrow was free from my leg, and I had a weapon. I spit the broken arrowhead into my left hand and stabbed it into Paw's neck, cutting his laughter into a muffled gurgle. "Oh shit!" yelled Ned as I swung myself onto the seat and planted the foot of my good leg against the side of his face with as much force as I could muster. I pushed his head into the glass of the window, all the while holding on to the arrow that was still embedded in Paw's neck. The little girl started screaming and the fat woman turned around to see what the fuss was about. I turned to her, then I noticed it, maybe 100 feet ahead, the man in the bear costume stepping out of the woods and crossing the road. I closed my eyes and braced for impact. She must have looked back and seen the bear because the truck lurched wildly to one side, then back to the other, like she had swerved to miss and then overcorrected, and then we started rolling. The sound of the crash was like an explosion. Pieces of broken glass and blood rained down all around me as my head hit the roof, then the seat, then the door, and finally the world stopped spinning and I was on my back with blood stinging my eyes. A warm hand reached under me and dragged me out of the wreckage and twisted mass of bodies and debris, through the cold wet grass and through a ditch, then dropped me into the road. I wiped my eyes and looked up at the giant black buttons of the man in the bear costume. He waved at me, then gave an excited double thumbs up before walking back to the truck, unzipping the fly on the bear's suit and pissing all over the wreckage. He did a little jig off into the forest, and that was the last I saw of him. What the fuck is happening? I checked the truck. The driver, Ned, and Paul were all dead. The little girl was nowhere to be found. I know if she had survived, it's unlikely I'd have any luck finding her. The weapons were gone too, probably flung out in the crash, and even though I would have felt a lot safer packing, it wasn't worth the time it would take to track them down. I made a quick bandage out of my shirt sleeve and wrapped it around my leg tight enough to slow the bleeding. Then I found a fallen branch long and strong enough to serve as a walking stick and started up the road in the direction of the gas station. I must have been a hell of a sight when I got back there. I was torn up and bleeding from several wounds, but none of that seemed to create a sense of care in the clerk behind the register, who still didn't even have the decency to look up from his damn book. I walked over to him and knocked on the counter, finally drawing his attention. I don't know what it takes to impress this guy, but the sight of me and my nearest to death sure as hell didn't even register with him. I need to use your phone. He tapped a small cardboard sign that was sitting on the counter. In sloppy black sharpet, someone had written the message. If you would like to use the store phone, it is 25 cents per minute. Please pay in advance. There are no exceptions. I reached for my wallet, only to remember that it wasn't on me. Ned had taken it and left it somewhere out in the woods. Look, asshole, this is a life or death situation. There's been an accident. I need to call the sheriff. The clerk spun the cardboard sign to the opposite side, where someone had written, "No exceptions means no exceptions. Not even life or death situations. Thank you for understanding. MGMT." Under normal circumstances, I would have resorted to a more physical solution, but at that moment I started feeling lightheaded and dizzy, and the next thing I knew, I was swinging in a hammock with my nails painted. Chapter 4. Where the hell am I? I repeated the question to Jerry. You're in the gas station dry supply closet. Why? Because the customers were complaining that they didn't want to keep stepping over you every time they wanted to buy something. But don't worry, I already called the deputy that babysits us. She's on her way here to arrest you or whatever she does, and in the meantime Jack says you can borrow one of his old crutches. Jerry held out a bottled water, and I took and downed the whole thing in one pull, then forced myself up from the hammock. I need to get out of here. There was an accident. People are dead. Cool, he said, but you probably shouldn't go anywhere until O'Brien shows up. I ignored him and left the closet on my own 2 feet. The pain in my leg was bad but bearable, and I'd rather power through than borrow somebody's spare crutches. When I stepped out into the store, the combination of natural and fluorescent lights hurt my eyes and gave me the realization that I had absolutely no idea what time it was. Is that him? I looked where the voice had come from to see a woman in a deputy uniform, staring back at me. She was tall and attractive, dark-skinned, with hair pulled back in a ponytail and a look on her face that said, "Don't even think about fucking with me." She had been leaning against the counter next to the cashier, the one with all the books. He looked over at me, then whispered something to her that I couldn't make out, which caused her to stand up straight and put her right thumb in her belt next to her gun holster. I've seen that tick before. She was trigger-happy and already ready to put me down if she needed to. "Mr. Riggin?" she asked. I stood perfectly still and put up my hands in front of me in the least intimidating way I could, remembering only then that I still had fresh red nail polish on my fingernails. "Officer," I said. She took a second, probably trying to figure out what kind of lunatic she was dealing with. In an effort to get in front of the whole thing, I tried explaining the situation. "There's been an accident, and I want to give a statement, but I've been attacked and require medical assistance." She cocked her head slightly to one side and said, "You look fine to me." "Bullshit, I do. I was in the truck when it flipped." "What truck? Are you fucking with me right now?" "Shit. Too much. Now her fingers were on the gun, ready to pull. I needed to reel it in a little. After a long, deliberate, loud breath I said, "Sorry, officer, I'm a little shaken up because I was just in an accident. The vehicle I was in went off the road and flipped." "You were in an accident?" "Yes." "Was anybody hurt?" "Was anybody hurt?" That was unexpected. How long had I been unconscious? There's no possible way they hadn't found the wreck, and the bodies, by now. Which meant she was either screwing with me or testing me. If it were the latter, then why? Was she trying to trip me up, get me to contradict my own story? That's when it hit me. This was an interrogation. There were bodies, victims, now, and someone was going to have to hang for it. I chose my next words very carefully. "Yeah. 3 people died in the wreck. I came straight here to call the police, but the blood loss knocked me out before I could. I can take you right to where it all happened." She took a step towards me. Just one. Putting herself between me and the cashier. That's interesting, I thought. If I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it, but her body language was telegraphing a clear message. I was an unknown, a potential threat, and her priority in this situation was protecting the guy behind the counter. What was even more interesting was what she didn't do. "All right, Mr. Riggin, we'll take my car and you can show me exactly where this all went down. Sound good?" It was only then that I noticed her soft Brooklyn accent. One thing was for sure, she wasn't local. I'd have to look her up once I got back to my phone or someplace with internet. "Yeah, okay." She gestured towards the door and let me lead the way, her hand never leaving the gun until we were both outside. She didn't call it in. I had just informed her that there were 3 dead bodies, and she didn't. Radio dispatch, backup, EMTs, anyone. There was one obvious reason why that would be the case. She must have already known about the car wreck. I saw her cruiser in the space farthest from the doors, parked backwards in the spot for a fast getaway. I stepped around to the passenger side and looked back at her, half expecting to see her pull the gun and take me down right there. But now that we were outside, she seemed instantly calmer. "Well?" she asked. "What are you waiting for?" "Doors unlocked." She opened the driver's side and took her spot behind the wheel. "She isn't going to make me ride in the back seat." "That's good. I think." I took my spot on the passenger side and instantly pulled on my seatbelt. But before I could even click it into place, O'Brien had the car pulled out to the road. "Which way?" I pointed back in the direction I had come. "Downhill, away from town." She peeled out and gunned the vehicle. I watched the side of the road for any signs of the bear, or the little girl, but at the speed she was driving, I doubt I'd have been able to pick them out if they weren't right next to the street. We passed the dirt road that led to the family's parking spot, and I made a mental note to come back later to find where Ned had left my wallet and keys. "It should be right up here, around this bend." I replayed the event in my mind. "Straight for about a mile. Then you'll see a dirt road on the left." Paw punching me in the gut. Their perverse laughter. The arrow. Stab. Screams. The bear. "All right, it should be right." O'Brien slowed the car and hit the red and blues, but we were right on top of where the truck had gone off the road, and there was nothing. "Where?" she asked. "Stop the car." I hopped out before she had even come to a complete stop on the shoulder of the road, ignoring the stinging in my leg as best I could. This wasn't possible. I couldn't have been unconscious that long. They had already moved the truck? I ran into the grass and stood in the exact spot where I had been pulled from the mangled wreck earlier that day, but there was nothing there. No sign of any wreckage. No blood. No debris. No ruts in the dirt. Not a single blade of grass out of place. O'Brien yelled out to me from her spot next to the cruiser. "I don't think it's out here." "Maybe. We should head up the road a ways. This all looks the same to me." "No, I'm certain it was right here." Well, it's not right here anymore, so how about we get you back into town and you can give a statement? I took a deep breath and caught an all too familiar aroma, one glaringly out of place on the side of the road near a thick forest. Bleach. I scanned the grass for something, anything that would prove I hadn't imagined it all, and walked up to the road for a better look. From there, I scanned both directions. No skid marks. No nothing. This wasn't a pull the wreck out of the woods operation. This was a hardcore cleanup crew. Somebody had put a hell of a lot of effort into covering it up. But why? Does this street look like it's been cleaned recently? I asked. O'Brien scoffed by way of an answer. I crossed to the opposite side of the road and knelt down. Pretty sure there's not a wreck over there either, nail Polish. Whoever did this had resources that I could barely even fathom. This would have taken money, manpower, precision. But even the most thorough cleanup crews will make mistakes when time is a factor. I reached into the grass and picked up a tiny shard of broken safety glass. An old silver pickup truck pulled up behind the deputy's cruiser, and again I reached for the empty spot on my right side. Like a phantom limb, I keep expecting to find my handgun, only to remember that I'm as vulnerable as I was when that family was arguing over who would get to kill me. The man stepped out of the truck and came around to face us with a big friendly smile. He was late 50s, with a dirty white beard and a camo jacket. A tucked-in white t-shirt showed off his pot belly spilling over the edge of his jeans. "Mornin'," he said to me, basically ignoring O'Brien. Wait, was it still morning? I hadn't actually seen a clock since I woke up, but there's no way. All of this could have been cleaned in just a few hours. "Hey," I said back. He laughed and said, "You look like shit." "What happened?" "Cut myself shaving." He finally acknowledged O'Brien with the simplest flash of eye contact before looking back to me and asking, "Y'all lose something?" Before I could answer, his cell phone started ringing and he put up a finger and dug it out of his pocket. "Yeah?" he said. His look turned into one of slight confusion before he lowered it, took a look around, then at the phone, then at O'Brien and me. Then he said, "Is one of you Eric Riggin?" I looked at O'Brien, who shook her head and laughed softly. "Don't look at me. I'm Eric. It's for you." I put the glass shard in my pocket and walked over to the man extending his phone. This whole situation was too much for my brain to digest, and I genuinely had no idea what was going on, who to trust, or even what was real anymore. That's when I first noticed that my tongue was feeling extra fat, and a warm sensation was pouring over me. It could have just been an effect of the blood loss, but somehow this felt different. I decided to ignore the feeling for now, and reached out for the phone. "This is Eric." "Finally! Where the hell have you been all day?" Of all the possible voices I expected to hear on the other end of that line, this was not one of them. "Roger? Who were you expecting, Santa Claus? How did you find me?" "I know things, detective. Time to take a little bit on faith, all right? I know the investigation got a little derailed this morning, huh? Somebody is screwing with you, which is a good sign. They're trying to throw you off the scent because you're asking questions and they aren't used to people in this town asking questions. You kicked their hornet's nest, and they're pissed off." I leaned away from O'Brien and whispered this next part into the phone. "Roger, I was attacked. People are dead." "Really?" He didn't sound all that surprised. "Well, we're going to definitely have to talk about that later. For now, though, I found something in Vanessa's file that we need to discuss." "You got a gun, yeah?" "Yeah, somewhere." "Ditch it. Drop it in the bottom of the ocean if you have to. I guarantee by now they've tied the ballistics to one or two of the open murder cases in town. Tell me one thing. What the hell is going on? Lose the copper. I don't know who to trust yet. And meet me at the bowling alley tonight at 8. Come alone. Pay attention, because you'll probably need to shake a tail. And detective? Yeah? Take a shower." With that, he disconnected. I looked at O'Brien, who was leaning against the trunk of her car, arms crossed and watching me. Who was it? She asked. I handed the phone back to the man and shrugged at the deputy. Looks like I made a huge mistake. Yeah? She asked incredulously. Yeah, I answered. She gave me a ride back to the gas station, while I spun a yarn about having a serious case of sleepwalking. I assured her that I had dreamt the whole thing up, and must have gone off into the woods in my unconscious state, gotten myself scraped up pretty bad, then wandered back into town confused and a little worse for the wear. Either she bought my story, or she had her own reasons to accept that there was no reason to press it further. She didn't strike me as an idiot, so I concluded that it must have been the latter. She brought me to my car and gave me a straightforward warning before she took off. I don't know what answers you think you're going to find, but I wouldn't stick around much longer if I were you. We got the guy who killed Vanessa. And take it from me, closure is overrated. Chapter 5. The first thing I did after she took off was check my car to see if I might have left some spare change somewhere. I figured I could probably dig enough coins out of the floorboards to get me a bite to eat before hot wiring the vehicle. I was only a little surprised to see my phone, wallet, and keys sitting on the passenger seat waiting for me. My head was spinning and I desperately needed something in my stomach, even if it was only gas station food. I did a quick run up and down the aisles, collecting whatever foodstuffs didn't look like they'd make me throw up, a bag of trail mix, some chips, a stick of jerky, and a Gatorade, and brought them to the counter where the cashier, Jack, was typing something up on a laptop. I knocked the counter to get his attention, and he looked up from what he was doing with a smile and said, "Found your wallet, huh?" I dropped the stuff in front of him and answered, "Go figure." He rang it all up and I paid, then he went back to his computer. I didn't feel like waiting any longer, so I opened the chips right there, and then had a small heart attack when hundreds of tiny spiders poured out of the opening in the bag. They were tiny, black, and crawling over one another in every direction. I dropped it to the ground and started stomping them all underneath my boot. "What the holy fuck?" I yelled at the cashier. He looked back at me with a raised eyebrow and asked, "What? Did you not see that? There was dash." Right then I lost all ability to speak. There was something in the store with us. Something impossible. Another spider was crawling up the wall behind the cash register. Only this one wasn't tiny. This one was at least the size of a Rottweiler, with shiny black legs as thick as walking sticks and a pulsating black abdomen. I could see the reflection of the fluorescent lights on its bulging wet black eyes, and I could make out clear as day the thick needle-like hairs covering its body. It crawled all the way up the wall, then turned upside down on the ceiling and started towards me. I grabbed the spot on my side where my gun should have been, and fell backwards into a display of pork rinds, landing on my ass. My voice finally came back to me and I screamed, "What is that fucking thing?" Jack clearly hadn't seen it yet. "What?" It was crawling, slowly but steadily, on the ceiling overhead. I waited quietly for it to move past me, never looking away, and only after it had crawled all the way to the other side of the store I whispered, "Do you see that?" Jack followed my eyes up to the ceiling, then looked back at me and said, "What, is it a giant spider?" "Yes." "What the fuck?" "No." The spider stayed at a constant speed and crawled back down the wall on the other side of the store near the coolers, but I lost sight of it behind the rows of groceries. I jumped to my feet and took a few steps to the side, trying to find where the thing had gone to, but it wasn't there anymore. I looked back at Jack, who was not reacting to this situation the way I would have expected, or really at all. "What do you mean, no?" I screamed. He sighed deeply and yelled out, "Marlboro, come here for a second." "Who are you talking to?" He stretched casually and closed his laptop, then looked me in the eyes and said, "It's the pain meds they gave me." I had to stop taking them because they were making me see spiders. What? I know, right? Weirdest side effect ever, but apparently it's a thing. Brand-specific hallucinations. Spiders everywhere. When I ate, when I slept. I decided that the pain wasn't as bad as spiders in my cereal. Wait, you drugged me? I didn't. The door to the storage closet opened and the clerk from earlier, the one that had painted my nails, came out drinking a beer. You rang? He asked. The cashier answered. Did you give this guy my old pain meds? Oh, most definitely, he answered. I ground up like 4 and put them in his water bottle. My heartbeat was finally starting to come back down to normal, the adrenaline spikes slowly being replaced by pure, undiluted rage. I tried to hold it together and asked as calmly as I possibly could. Why would you do that? He smiled, shrugged, and said, Just trying to help. I rubbed my eyes and took a deep breath. If he had been a little closer, I probably would have slugged him. Thankfully, I managed to keep my cool. This is so fucked. Hey man, are you alright? Asked the cashier. What part of this looks alright to you? I replied. Yeah, I figured as much. You're Vanessa's uncle, right? That's right. You knew her? A little. She was a decent worker, always showed up on time, never stole anything. I was bummed out when she disappeared. I sorta hate to ask, but do you know what happened to her? Maybe it was just the drugs, but I was having trouble getting a read on this guy. Was he for real? I'm planning on figuring that out. I take it you don't buy the story about her joining a cult? I caught the quickest micro-expression when I said cult. He looked at the other worker for just a moment, then back at me and said, No. I don't think she joined the cult. There was something else going on here. I asked him directly, What exactly do you think happened? I don't know. The other worker piped in with, Maybe a demon got her. The cashier looked at him and said, What, like in Twin Peaks? Dude, spoilers! That show has been out for 20 years. Either you're going to watch it or you're not. This was pointless. These two were using each other for deflection, and if I were going to find out what either of them knew, I'd need to separate them. The only question is, how? Right then, the cashier leaned back to grab his crutches off the wall and said, Marlboro, take over for me. I'm going to lunch. Okie dokie, said Jerry. Or Marlboro. Or whatever the hell his name actually was. He struck me as the kind of guy that would find somebody else's name tag and wear it just because. Hey, I said after the cashier had stood up. How about I take you to lunch? He looked at me for an awkward couple seconds and asked, Why would you do that? I want to ask you some questions. About Vanessa? I really didn't know her that well. About this town. I'll pay for lunch. What do you say? He mulled the offer over for a few more silent seconds, then nodded and said, Okay. I checked my phone during the drive just to see what time it was, 12:05 p.m., then I tossed it out the window. Even if they hadn't bugged it, there was no way in hell I could ever trust it again. We went to a small diner in town called Maryland's, where we both ordered the same thing, a cheeseburger and fries. I took black coffee and he drank a root beer. I let him eat before I got to the questions. It didn't take me long to devour my entire meal. Thankfully, there were no spiders. Whatever Marlboro had put in my drink had worn off completely, and the pain in my leg was back in full force, but it was hard to complain while sitting across from this guy. At least I still had all of my limbs. From what I could see, he was a below-the-knee amputee. The way he worked his crutches made it clear that this was a recent development. I decided to keep my complaints to myself. After he'd finished his burger, I tried to ease into the questions, and learned as much as he would let me know. This guy was private, and all I could get out of him were the basics. His name was Jack. He was much younger than me. Worked at the gas station pretty much since high school, and he liked to mind his own business. I finally got around to asking about his injury, not expecting much of an answer. But surprisingly, he opened up like it was no big deal. I got a complex fracture a while ago and broke my leg in 2 places. Not so surprisingly, this town doesn't have the best medical facilities. There were some complications. I caught a strain of antibiotic-resistant Acinetobacter, and long story short dash. He imitated a chainsaw noise and gestured like he were cutting off his own leg, then he took a sip of root beer. What do you know about this cult? I watched his face for any kind of tell, but this time, if there were any reactions, he was keeping a lid on them. Not much. A dozen or so attractive millennials joined up with a charismatic personality. He recruited them from all over using the internet, promised enlightenment and orgies. Didn't end so well. I heard. Spencer Middleton part of that cult? Jack visibly shuddered at the mention of Middleton. Interesting. No, he answered, but it certainly wraps the whole story up nice and neat, doesn't it? You think Spencer is innocent? Jack laughed and shook his head. No, he's very much the opposite of innocent. I'm just saying he isn't exactly a team player. Outside the window, I saw the cruiser swing into the parking lot. Shit. Running out of time. Look, I finally said. Some weird stuff happened to me today when I was out in those woods. Things I can't exactly explain. And I'd like nothing more than to fall asleep for a couple weeks and recharge, but I can't right now. I think there's something wrong with this town. And I think Vanessa got caught up in it. And I think that maybe, just maybe, you know what's going on. Why would you think that? The deputy that's about to come busting in here. She seems awfully protective of you. The door opened and O'Brien scanned the place, spotting us immediately. Jack still had his back to her. He said, "You're not wrong. Weird things happen here. But you're looking in the wrong place. Vanessa wasn't part of the cultists. They died way before she went missing. How do you know the cultists are dead? I thought they were only missing." "That's enough questions for now, nail polish," said O'Brien as she put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You good crutches?" she asked him. "Peachy," he answered. If there had been any doubt, that had taken it away. There was something going on with Jack and O'Brien. Maybe she was just protecting him. Maybe they were working together. Maybe they were hooking up. I didn't know, and it was damn near impossible to get a look inside his head. But the one thing I took away from that interaction was this: I believed him. He knew more about the cult than he was letting on. And Vanessa wasn't a part of it. So that put me close to square one. I had a meeting with Roger in 7 hours and time to burn. The sobering fact that I had killed a man that morning in self-defense was burning in the back of my mind, and I knew that when the time came I would have to deal with that. But this was not that time. This was the time to play through the pain. There would be a chance for a nervous breakdown later, after I found Vanessa. Or her killer. Jamie looked pretty shocked to see me. I didn't feel like explaining everything, so I just asked him to put on 2 pots of boiling water and to find me some rubbing alcohol, floss, and a sewing kit. He's a good kid, and I hate to keep traumatizing him, but I couldn't go to the hospital, just in case. Once the pots were boiling, I dropped the sewing needle into one and my car keys into the other. I knew better than most people how easy it is to bug anything these days. Even my wallet was going to stay in the console of my car until I could get back home and order new credit cards. It was going to be nothing but cash from here out. My nephew didn't question it for a second when I told him I was going to be driving Vanessa's Honda for the rest of the time I was in town. I couldn't afford the very likely possibility that my car had been bugged. He didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't volunteer too many answers. The furthest we got was, "Why are your nails red?" "I have no idea." I strung some floss through the needle and bent it into a hook shape. This was going to hurt if I did it right, and hurt even worse if I did it wrong. At that moment I wondered if it might actually be worth the spiders to keep from feeling the pain I was about to feel. I ripped off the duct tape cast, layer at a time, all the way down to the base. Then I peeled back the final layer to see the grisly X-shaped wound on my leg. Just when I think nothing can surprise me anymore, I'm proven wrong. Son of a bitch. Somehow, someone had beaten me to the punch. The wound was very neatly stitched up, almost professionally. The work was so clean it would leave but minimal scarring. Next to it, under a dried layer of blood, I could make out shaky handwriting where somebody had drawn on my leg with a black marker. Jerry was here. I set the needle on the table and asked Jamie if he had any old antibiotics in the house. Yeah, probably. I'm going to need all of them. It's amazing the difference a shower and clean clothes can make. I popped a handful of painkillers, the over-the-counter type, and took apart one of Donnie's old speakers to get to the magnet. I'm not saying I think Marlboro stitched a tracker or a listening device inside of my leg wound, because that would be crazy. I'm just saying I ran a few passes of the extra strong magnet over the stitches, just to be safe. Next, I went into Vanessa's room and stood for a silent moment, taking it in and trying to find a balance between respecting her privacy and tearing the place apart for clues. There was still plenty of time before my meeting, but right then I was kicking myself for all the time I'd wasted by getting shit-faced when there were still answers out there to be found. I did a quick mental recap to see where I stood. Facts. This town has a weird secret. Someone powerful enough to make a flip truck and 3 bodies disappear in the span of a couple hours was screwing with me. Someone knew how to imitate my brother, lure me into a bizarre trap in the woods, but why? The sheriff's department was only pretending to look into Vanessa's disappearance. The cult was just a cover story. Was Vanessa even involved in any of this? I was swimming through questions without any answers when I heard Jamie say, "Hey, Uncle Eric?" I snapped out of my daze and turned to see Jamie standing in the doorway. "Yeah, kiddo? You have a visitor,"